such as the mayor. The mayor could nominate because he or she is a resident for longer than a year. So we felt like that really covered a lot of bases. So that's essentially who could be the nominator. There was a question, and I think in the earlier, the adopted version, about a community organization being a nominator. One of the problems with that, we found in sort of rethinking our approach, is that the city, unlike Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and some other third-class cities, the city does not have a way of identifying designating community-based organizations. They just don't do that. So it really kind of leaves it open to any organization that might call themselves community-based. We felt that was too open-ended, and so did not include that in this draft. But again, if a board member of a CBO or or leadership, an executive director of a local nonprofit is a resident, they could nominate. And we don't really, and if the CBO wants to fund the nomination, they could certainly do that. So we felt like it was already covered. And then in the nomination procedures, and I'm just going to keep talking until I get to the end, and then we'll open up for conversation or discussion. The nomination procedures, essentially the to the historic preservation planner. The preservation planner has 15 business days, so essentially 3 weeks to decide if the application, review it, and decide if the application is complete. If the application is complete, the application then would flow to the HRC as a complete application. So this should be in its pretty final form for the HRC to review, and whether or not it meets your criteria for designation. At that time, you have 30 days to host a public meeting. You would also inform and notify either the owner of record if it's a single resource, or if it's a district, by posting in conspicuous places that the meeting was going to be held, and to request that the owner or the people who live in the district to come to the public meeting and provide comment. This isn't a public hearing, it's just a public meeting. They provide comment and feedback to the HRC. You would then make your decision on whether or not you believe that this warrants an historic preservation overlay. You make your report to the Planning Commission, because this is essentially a rezoning of the property. Even though it's an overlay, it's still an amendment to the zoning map, so it's considered a rezoning. So the Planning Commission would receive your report. Within 30 days of receiving the report, they send their own report to City Council. And then once City Council receives it, City Council either decides to move forward with the designation, and if so, a public hearing would have to be held. At that point in time, the owner of record and anyone else who may be affected by the nomination would then also have another opportunity to speak to City Council. They would also have an opportunity to speak during Planning Commission's consideration. So it is quite lengthy. There's a lot of days involved. It gives you hopefully a lot of time in between different steps, so you can take some time to consider it. But again, we really wanted to take some pressure off the preservation planner in receiving these nominations, give them some authority to determine if they're complete before sending them on to the HRC. And then in the certificate of appropriateness, and then I'll kind of end it here, we really wanted to help clarify what constitutes our certificate of appropriateness review. And it is pretty much everything needs to be reviewed, but how it's reviewed. If it's a minor alteration, And you can define that. We really wanted to give you some latitude to make that definition or define that more precisely in the application for the COA and the guidance for the COA, and not necessarily make it so prescriptive within the ordinance. So we've written the definition fairly broadly for both minor and major, so you can make those determinations within an application that you can review and revise pretty easily and not have to go through another ordinance amendment. So a certificate of appropriateness for any demolition, any new construction, either as a principal building or as an accessory building or structure, and then any exterior alteration, period. Now, within exterior alteration, that includes major or minor. Minor is reviewed administratively, and then what we'll do is we'll make that a little bit more specific what that means in your application for certificate of occupancy. And then major, again, same thing, would require HRC review, same as new construction or demolition and approval. And we would make, again, that determination beyond new construction and demolition. We would make that a little more specific in your application rather than doing it in the ordinance. And then I know Jackie had submitted or given you a memo that highlights some of the outstanding questions, and I just want to point out there were 3 that had received quite a bit of discussion, either with Heather before she left, with Jackie, of course, and then between Matthew and Bill as we were developing this ordinance. And one of them was who is eligible to nominate. There was a discussion that it should have to have a property owner's support letter in order to move forward as a complete nomination. So either if it's not the owner of record, then you have to have the owner's support. That is not something that is recommended because for a number of reasons, but primarily the power for a municipal government to zone, because this is the zoning of a property, is in their police power, and they can do that. They can plan and zone their community without approval of the property owner because it's a higher purpose, the public safety, health, and welfare. And so we didn't want to circumvent the power of the municipal government to plan and zone their community by requiring it and tying it to the property owner. So that is not in there. There was also a request to exempt religious institutions. And I can speak a little to that, and I know Bill might want to speak even more to that. But we thought exempting a protected class really would set the city up for a lot of challenges because why exempt one owner of property and not others? So we really thought that was not the direction you should go. And then there's a question about designation of interior public spaces. I know Matthew had suggested that that's not in there. There was some concern, and I know we'll ask Bill this when he can hear me, hopefully. There was some question about the legality of that in the state of Pennsylvania, particularly with third-class cities and MPC. So those are the 3 areas that we had lots of discussion on and sort of a little bit of reasons why they are not in the current draft. So I'll stop there and open it up for questions, and hopefully Bill and Matthew can hear those questions and my answers or chime in on their own.
Kathy, I just want to mention that I think Bill and Matthew can hear you. I also have Jason Check, the solicitor, here with us. So this discussion includes Jason, and he's been part of some of these processes. So.
Okay, sounds good. I'm glad they can hear me.
Now, you're saying we are not going to require the owner to have a approval letter.
That is correct. We're not requiring that as part of the nomination.
Because that's oftentimes the entity that you know, lots of times the owner
That's,
building's best interest at heart. Okay, thank you.
Yes, and I don't know if that microphone is working. So Jason is coming to the podium, but Jason, you may have to just come up.
Yeah, I know. Is this working?
Can you hear him, Kathy?
I can
Hello?
hear,
Can you hear me?
I think I can hear him.
Okay. Do I need to speak louder? Yeah, probably. That's not my strength. Kathy, this is kind of directed towards you. One of the reasons that we voted on the moratorium back in November was specifically because there were certain properties that were being nominated without the owner's original consent. And there was two specific instances where the property owners were different, either nonprofits or state agencies, and they basically threatened legal action, immediate legal action, if those nominations proceeded without their approval. Now, the way I looked at it is, one, I don't want the city or the Historic Review Commission specifically being sued. Two, when you place a historic designation on a property, that does restrict the use of the property. Now, I know we might be talking about repainting the property, adding an addition, or something like that. But if there's a historic property, I don't see how the preservation part of it, this is legally now, falls under safety, welfare, or health for just historic preservation purposes. Now, if there's a property that someone wants to preserve and it's in really bad shape, it would actually, in my mind, fall under code enforcement. Because in code enforcement, that's where the property maybe the roof is falling in. So out there, it's a safety issue. You can't go in the building because the roof will collapse and someone could get hurt. But whether a building is historically preserved or not, I would suggest that does not fall under the city's powers for zoning. It's a special thing, is my opinion.
Yeah. Just refer to you to the municipal planning code, which does state that one of the powers within zoning is historic preservation. I'm not saying that verbatim, but really one of the main reasons why this is in the zoning ordinance is because it is permitted within the MPC, that is a permissible power of the municipal government through their zoning, is historic preservation. Now, and Bill can speak to the ordinances that are just historic preservation ordinances outside of utilizing zoning to do that. They essentially follow very similar processes. But what you're suggesting is that this shouldn't even be a permissible protection in the zoning at all, it's just not the case. It is permissible, and it's in the MPC that this is a permissible use of zoning, and historic preservation is one of the ways that you can utilize the zoning to protect properties.
And I'm not saying that the city doesn't have a historic review commission or do historic preservation. What I'm saying is they can't do it without the owner's consent.
Well, and this is where you and I disagree on this. I would strongly suggest that you not preempt the city's ability to plan and completely zone their property or their city using all the tools within the zoning ordinance. So the zoning does and can do a lot more than just limit the use of property, as you, I'm sure, are well aware. But this doesn't even really limit the use of the property. It's how the property is maintained. So, but that is absolutely permissible within the laws of the city as given to it by the municipal planning code.
I would disagree with that. And I would strongly encourage, like any change to Article 7, that the owner be involved, highly involved. And if the owner can't be involved and the property is still something that the city wants to preserve, then you need to go through it another way. Historic preservation is not health, safety, or welfare of the community. It's just not.
Well, and I don't mean to go
I
back
can
and
speak to
forth,
this
but if
a
you're
little
saying
bit.
it's not part of health,
far as I
safety,
can
and
hear the
welfare, you're
conversation.
suggesting
There's
that
two
the
people
agency
talking,
should
and
not
I
have
can't
been
hear
created
either
through
one
the
of you.
zoning ordinance. Nor should this be enacted through the zoning ordinance, and that's just not the case. And so I think you're talking about a much larger issue that needs to be addressed. You would not, I would hope, preempt the city's ability to zone any property without property owner's consent, or if the property owner is requesting a zoning amendment or rezoning, many times the city has denied that rezoning. So even in the instance where the property owner is requesting something and has been denied, that is certainly within the power of city council. And we wouldn't want you to preempt their ability to do that. I know Bill is trying to speak, so.
No, I'm not preempting that. If somebody wants to come in front of the zoning board with their own property, they're like, hey, I'd like to rezone this, then that's something up to the zoning board. I'm talking just strictly historical preservation, though. I think the property owner needs to be
This is a
involved.
zoning, this is a rezoning of the property. It's essentially what this is. It's an overlay on the zoning map.
If the zoning is going to inhibit the property owner from doing it without their consent, that's not proper.
That's settled case law, both on the state and national level. I would encourage you to familiarize yourself with Penn Central versus New York, which was settled in '79. I mean, this is, I can respect
Wait,
your
Matthew,
personal
Matthew,
point of
time
view,
out.
but from a
Matthew.
legal perspective,
Matthew, I'm
It's
sorry.
it's echoing, Matt, sorry.
Let me add you to this call so that
It was echoing.
so you can speak through the telephone because we can't hear you. Hold on. Who's in a meeting?
Hello.
Matthew, can you hear me?
I can't accept now you're echoing. So
So you need to probably drop your
drop
Zoom for a moment.
let me see
Or
what I can do.
he's muted already. On his
Right.
Zoom.
So I trust you can hear me. Just to reiterate what I said before, this is settled case law, and this has been settled since the 1970s. I would absolutely implore you to look up the case with Penn Central versus New York, which settled it on a national level, and encourage you to review Pennsylvania's constitution, which establishes historic preservation as a right, and municipalities' right to enforce that. I can absolutely appreciate your personal perspective, but speaking exclusively from a legal perspective, this is absolutely settled. There's no room for discussion.
What year is your case? What year is the Penn Central case? Oh, what year? You cited the Penn Central case. What year was that from?
I'm at a disadvantage here because I can no longer hear what you are saying.
What year, Jason is asking what year is the Penn Central case from?
1979, I believe? 79, 78?
I'll look up the case, but just because the Supreme Court says you can do something, if that case wasn't appealed from Pennsylvania, because Penn Central, was that in New York?
Yes, Penn Central was in New York.
Right, so if,
Someone's fax machine
Can anybody hear me?
Okay, wait, let me get him
You
on.
can hear me?
Hold on 1 second.
I can hear you.
okay.
Do I get a medal for this? Seriously. 412. One second.
We can't all.
Can you hear me yet?
Everyone's not going to agree with the betterment
Bill,
of the
can you
community.
hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Now Matthew, Kathy, and Bill are all on the same call, so if you want to drop Zoom, you can, because you're not going to see each other, but you all hear each other.
That's fine. I can hear you clearly.
Okay, Bill,
I just backed out of the Zoom call.
everybody can hear you including
Okay, good.
Kathy and Matthew and Jason. So go ahead.
Okay. I haven't, I've been doing this for 35 years, and this is settled case law. At the federal level, with the U.S. Supreme Court, Penn Central versus City of New York, 1978, and in Pennsylvania, it's the United Artists Theater versus the City of Philadelphia, in the PA Supreme Court, 1993, 92. And further, the municipalities planning code doesn't actually requires municipalities to zone for historic resources. I mean, it's actually in the MPC. Cities choose to do that in various ways, but one of the ways that they are enabled by the MPC to do it is through zoning. So this is, I guess, I don't know how else to say this, but this is settled case law. That doesn't mean people can't sue. Of course they can. The question becomes, however, actually winning the suit. And this is, again, it's settled. I mean, this is part of settled case law and preservation circles for really, frankly, decades now. The city of Pittsburgh, for example, in their zoning ordinance, it's been around since 1971. And there have been legal challenges to it for a variety of reasons. City of Chicago recently went through a major lawsuit, and they won. Pittsburgh's ordinance and Chicago's are very similar. Erie's, this ordinance, as it's been amended now, is very similar to Pittsburgh's. The question becomes more of how to administer a zoning ordinance and not whether or not zoning, frankly, as it's allowed by the MPC, is legal.
I still think the owner should be involved. Now, and most people who come in front of the Historic Review Commission, I like history. I was a history major, right? Like, I don't want to stop history. I don't want to stop progress. If we have an old building in Erie County, and I'm from Pittsburgh, like, there's not much history here. If it dates to the mid-1800s, that's historic, okay? We want to preserve that. However, if I own a property, the house is from 1850, and someone designates my house for historic status, and then I sue and I lose against the city. So now I have this burden on my house. I want to sell my house for $100,000, but because of these restrictions, my house is now worth $80,000 because the person who buys it has to come in front of multiple boards, multiple opinions before they can even buy paint at Lowe's, or change the roof, or add an addition on. That is it's a restriction on the property, and it could be a burdensome one. So you're making the property of a person less valuable. That's why I really encourage
both the U.S. and PA Supreme Courts. That was exactly the basis of the suits, was that this was an illegal taking, and in both cases that was determined not to be the case. And in fact, I mean, this is a completely different issue, but there have been study after study over the decades that actually historic designation improves the value of a property over time, and that's a different conversation, obviously, but both the state and federal Supreme Courts have addressed the issue of whether or not this was a taking, and both have said no.
Well, just the city.
United Artists is a little bit more nuanced. If you look that up, it's a little bit more nuanced. It's a three-pronged test, but that's it's available to see.
Yeah. The problem here is that the city has gotten two requests one from a state agency and one from essentially a nonprofit religious organization that they will sue if the application goes forward. Now, you're right. You would hope that we could fight it all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and we'll spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal fees and taxpayer money. We'll foot the bill for that. But courts change their mind. I think the easiest way to make sure you protect taxpayer money and get what you want is to have the owner involved. And if the owner says, we really don't want our property to be designated historic, then don't do it.
I understand what you're saying, but that's a policy question. It's not a legal question.
But it could be policies derived from the ordinance. You guys interpret the ordinance and the application and all the documents through that. It's all part of one process. Because the board here is going to change over the next 10, 20, 30 years. The rules are hopefully setting up for the future.
The commission
Right. So,
Historic preservation, if you're serious about it, without an ability to nominate.
Part of this is an
enough-
educational process. When we're talking about preservation, people are, especially in Erie, they're not used to historic preservation. So we've been trying to educate them about what the value of it, and again, you have to. Some people may not agree to everything, but the idea is to have the majority of people, and especially the city, benefit from it, which the benefits outweigh these small little inconveniences of going to get your paint approved. You know what I mean? So I could speak to that easily, but my thought is it's an educational process that we're all trying to provide, and it's tough for the city of Erie because a lot of these groups and agencies aren't used to this.
no. And
Again, I'm not saying they're at fault at it at all. Because
no, and I like the idea about who can nominate. I'm not saying people can't nominate a property. What I'm saying is that when you get to a certain point, if the property owner says, no, like I'm not changing my mind, that kind of situation. Not like you can always educate them. I'm always a fan of education. Or picking a property who a person said no last year, contacting them a year later saying, hey, remember when we contacted you? We still think your house would be great for historic preservation. You've had a chance to think about it or percolate it. That's what I'm saying.
Well, let's play that out, shall we? I mean, again, I really do believe that we're talking more about policy issues than legal issues, but let's play that out. The purpose of an ordinance like this is that, as stated in the MPC, that preservation is a public benefit. And the ordinance is set up to establish identification of historic resources and then a method by which to protect them. The HRC's role in these instances are to provide guidance to City Council about these issues through the ordinance. In order to identify and designate historic properties, there needs to be something in the ordinance that allows the HRC to make those determinations. Now, if in the end you get to the City Council and there are outstanding reasons why the City Council believes that this should not be in designated historic property, that's up to them. But to flip your argument there a little bit here is that by allowing individuals to subjectively opt out of an ordinance, of a zoning ordinance, opens the city up to legal challenge from the other side. That you're allowing people to opt in or out of a zoning ordinance. Why can't I? I don't like the use that I've been zoned for. Why can't I opt out of that? It's just not. It's allowing for the designation of historic resources, making those recommendations from the HRC to the City Council is really a foundational element of a municipal preservation program. How that gets implemented then is dependent upon how well the ordinance is written, how well the HRC and the City Council are educated as to the specific resources, and then how that moves ahead through that process. Simply by allowing an individual to opt out of zoning is in itself fraught.
Well, if we're changing the zoning code, we're changing the zoning code, why then isn't this going in front of the zoning hearing board?
Jason, it will go in front of the Planning Commission and City Council as an ordinance amendment.
Yeah, but
This
if we're
is
changing-
in front of the HRC
but
for
we're
their
doing
input, but
this-
then it will have to go through the process of the zoning amendment.
Yeah. Yeah, but they could. No.
So it does go, like Kathy said, they're not really the decision-making body for
Right.
changes to the zoning ordinance. It would be planning commission.
No, I understand that, but I still think I've already made my comments. I'm not here to argue back and forth.
Yeah.
I bet we've had, and Jackie knows, and Heather receiving, we've had 2 serious legal threats. Okay, I could turn those over to our insurance carriers. We're going to be spending $100,000 on legal fees. Those will get maxed out. And I don't think by having the policy tied to the mission, tied to the language of the ordinance, having all three of them try to triangulate if possible is a problem. And I think having stress that we want the owner's involvement as much as possible. And then if there's is there a property that's really worth taxpayer money that we need preserved? I mean, if there is, then I guess that could be the golden goose for your test case. But I wouldn't want to test this out in court. Because old reasons for why a case got approved or denied at the appellate level 25 years ago, there's different judges, different justices on those courts. And now we're getting into the realm of like politics. And then it's not really in the realm of historic preservation anymore. That's my opinion. So.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay. With that said, yeah, I think the, we have to just finalize the language and move forward and take in all the comments. And I know that Kathy put forth those questions, so I guess we just need to decide on the final language that we're putting forth. But we're obviously not going to vote on this today, as far as the final, or is that the intention of some of the commissioners?
I think we wanted to make some decisions on those three items because they're the ones that have been out, in question. I don't know necessarily if it calls for a vote, but I think some decision was to be made today on those items.
Can I ask some general questions?
Yeah, that's what we're here for. Yeah.
And just kind of share some of it. I mean, to some degree, like tearing buildings down, or to some degree, that tearing buildings down that are of historic significance has been done most commonly by religious institutions and giant not-for-profits. It's not generally a private individual, although it has happened, that they choose to tear down their historically significant piece of property. So if we were serious about keeping those pieces of property from being torn down, from being dismantled, from being used in other ways, then you'd have to include the institutions that are most apt to do that, whether they like it or not. Am I stepping out of line here by saying that?
They're all on. Everybody's on.
I'm here.
Am I stepping over the line?
Ask that again, Craig?
We wondered why the religious institutions were being exempt.
Well, they're not. It was a question that had been posed. I don't know if it was a discussion from the HRC, but it definitely was a discussion point between me and Heather and Jackie. Probably most recent nomination requests. There was a concern from a church that was being considered for nomination that it was somehow against canon law that they be designated. And we just pointed out that it's not the city's role to uphold canon law, but the MPC is what should prevail. And I guess, again, not exempting a certain class of owners from zoning would be our recommended course of action. So we did not exempt them.
Jason, check again. I'm not here to cause another stir, but I was part of the conversation, and the conversation wasn't really specifically about canon law, although the church in question was Catholic, but it was a little bit broader, saying that if the HRC approves, let's say, St. Andrews, hypothetically, that's a Catholic church, is the city and the HRC, which is a secular government organization, favoring a religion? It was more of a separation of church and state question, which I'll let you guys think about. Because then what if the Episcopalian Church says, hey, why weren't we contacted about historic preservation, or some other group? So I think it also was a church and state conversation.
But they could nominate themselves if they so chose.
Right.
Or anybody could nominate them if they so chose.
Right.
This is more about being excluded from nomination.
Right, that's how the And that's how the conversation started. So if someone's picked them, but then someone else said, at the Episcopalian Church, you guys don't deny their application, all, again, hypothetical, then is there favoritism? Is there some sort of,
I mean, it
No.
would be based on religion, but not on
Oh.
architectural.
yeah, but I think it comes down to the optics, right? So then could someone challenge and say, they turned me down, but we'll sue and force them to accept us? And then maybe their main argument is that, well, the religion may not be true. You understand what I'm saying? It's all optics. It's all politics at that point. So that's part of the conversation, though. I just wanted to throw that out there so you guys know. That's kind of what we were talking about. But it was in relation to the St. Andrews. And then that got into
Can
more
we,
specific canon law.
As a productive course of discussion, can we talk about notification? Because I see that in some parts of the revised ordinance, it does reference notification, like we're talking about, where am I? 706.2 subsection D, when it's talking about the nomination process, it says within 30 days, the HRC will do this, and then within 15 days, mail will be sent prior to the meeting date. Is there an opportunity to make notification a more robust part of this ordinance by where we not only make it clear what the city's responsibility is for notification, but also put some of the onus on the applicant, whereby they can, as part of the application, provide proof of notification to a property owner?
The answer is,
So in that way,
I would agree with that as well.
there is no, I don't want to say there's no surprise, but it drastically limits the possibility for a surprise.
Yes, that makes sense.
No one's interest.
And if in the current application,
That's a good question, Matthew. I just want to chime in a little bit because I've seen it done both ways where either the applicant is responsible for notification or that is in the hands of administration. It's administrative. So you could do it either way. I think the one piece of, if you require the applicant, then it's the making sure that there is a good way to confirm that they have sent notification. So is that registered mail and then you have the receipts, or how would that be done? If it's mostly in the case, right, of a district where you have multiple properties. So I think it's just administratively how you wanted to handle that and just confirm whether or not notification has been made. I also just want to point out too, that this is just the first bite of the apple for the property owner to have input, because through the rezoning process, right, so they would have an opportunity to speak to planning commission, and then of course the public hearing, city council. So it's a good question, and I love to hear other people's responses to that too.
That's the way it's set up.
I know.
It's check and balance.
no, I guess my question though is like, why, if let's say the property owner doesn't know, why then let planning commission and city council even get that far? I mean,
But it does,
I think we should
the
inform them.
it does say all property owners of an individual historic resource shall receive notice. I mean, it is in D already.
Yes.
The fact that it's not, there's no proof of notification or confirmation of notification, that is not in there. But the owner is to be notified and was notified in those two, the one property that we did have those issues with.
yeah,
They were notified.
a couple days in advance, yes.
No, that's not true.
And one of
They
them
were-
was,
Well, the first one,
yeah.
they
No,
were notified.
What I would say is the current application, when there's a little subsection like A through G, I think, or whatever it is, that, does the owner know, or have you had a chance to contact? And it's not a mandatory, it's like, if you have had a chance, like it's an optional thing. So I would ask probably for the application to say, has the owner been notified? The person who does this, make sure they've been notified. But definitely the city or the historic preservation planner, they would need to do their homework anyway, because you don't want the planning commission to say no to something and kick it back down, because you don't want to be redundant. But that's all I'm saying. I'm a fan of history major.
I think those are
But this is more for me is like more of a procedure and the right purpose, so that you actually are spinning your wheels forward and not just being stuck in the snow. Just to use since it's so snowy outside.
Right.
Yeah, well, and,
But we have seen those institutions, in fact, tear down
yeah.
unique,
Just down the
irreplaceable
road.
pieces of real estate.
You know?
Right.
And they do it without any notification to anybody else, because they own it.
Well, the specific reference to canon law is that a church, there's a difference between, if you look at canon law, the difference between the sacred and the profane, right? The sacred, of course, is the religious significance, just generally. Profane, no religious significance. So once a church has been desanctified, essentially they go from sacred to profane, that building probably could be up for sale. So if you have a historic property, like especially if it's the Catholic Church organization, they probably will be willing to sell a profane building, but not a sacred building, if that makes sense, to whoever wants to make it historic property. Now, obviously, that could be an
I don't think that
organization.
matters, yeah.
I understand, but I'm saying if you for their purposes.
I understand. I'm not being argumentative.
Oh, no. And I don't want to get into the nuances of religion.
Right.
So.
But these are some of the discussions that we've
I
had
get that.
internally along the way through some of these, but, yeah, I mean, those are the things that have come up on their end that said, oh, well, once it's desanctified, sure.
Right. But some things, if I may carry this conversation a little bit further, stop me when you want me to. Let's say, just to use an example, the real estate that was torn down to make the extension for prep on 10th Street. That wasn't a church. That was a house. It was never sanctified. It's not sanctified.
No.
Correct. But yet it was still torn down without a blink. So I think we can use the far extreme of saying the cathedral, okay, as opposed to the garage next to the cathedral.
Yeah.
And those are not the same arguments. So while we could argue in the extreme, overwhelmingly, that's not what happens.
No, I think the particular case for us, though, specifically was a church, still owned by the church, still used
As a church.
On a lesser level, because of the reorganization, but still a church, yes. I was not talking about the garage next to the church.
I
But
get
I see
it.
what you're saying.
But there's a middle ground.
I still think the property owner.
I hear what you're
So
saying.
we've
I'm
already
not
said-
arguing, I'm just having a
Yeah,
conversation.
Notification.
No, I think that's a good.
It
I mean,
seems like there's no harm in this in ensuring that there's ample notification. And
Yeah,
what
you
we
should
have now
notify.
is a 15-day notice before a preliminary kind of hearing. But there's a potential to have even kind of more notice and to ensure that there's a conversation between an applicant and an owner of a property.
And if I could, Matthew, just to, again, to be extended, we've had this conversation. People can buy a piece of property and tear it down the same day in Erie, Pennsylvania. How about the fact that there could be changes in ordinances, that there's a yin and a yang, that they have to create notification if they're going to tear down a piece of real estate that is such and such a year old, and that they can't automatically do so. And that's a give and take.
It's a good suggestion, but well outside of our purview.
I get
I know
it.
the city does have a demolition
Within
permit
the
that is
context
needed
here, I
under the
think that we have
ordinance.
an opportunity
So,
to ensure
one
that
day.
people are
Yeah, but I mean, it's something. That
at
could
least
be
being
something you propose to
good
city
neighbors,
council, though.
to one another and
As part of your
talking
ongoing
about
work in
something kind
education.
of before it lands itself at our feet as a government agency. I would very much kind of advocate for the including language into the ordinance here that puts some responsibility on an applicant to ensure that either by, I think your suggestion, Kathy, about registered mail, that seems like excellent kind of proof of that conversation initiating kind of before it lands at the doorstep.
So we would add in as part of the nomination application, right, that there be proof through registered mail, certified mail of some sort,
That they've been
that the
notified.
property owner has been at least notified. And then they would also get re-notified by the city of when the HRC will be meeting to discuss the nomination. That sounds like an appropriate approach, Matthew, that meets your concerns?
Yeah, I think that the more that we can clarify would have noticed in advance, the better off we are. And that sounds like a really good addition.
Now, we could be here all day, so do we want to finalize our discussion here
Well,
with these
yes,
items? Because that was number one.
That was
And I
number
think we agree that the, there's going to be notification and proof of notification,
Yes, confirmation.
but we're not looking for permission. So I think
That's
we
right.
we all agreeing with that.
Is that
Yes.
what the
Yes.
HRC agrees upon?
I've agreed with everything we've
Okay.
said.
Then the religious, is there any question about the religious discussion? No, everyone's nodding their head in the same direction.
Doesn't matter.
And the last item is the designation of public
Oh, the
interiors of building.
That's a good question.
I mean, we
So
never
I'm going to
discussed.
turn that over. Hopefully Matthew and Bill can take that. Matthew had made that suggestion that be a role or responsibility of HRC. And I know Bill had some questions about the legality of that in Pennsylvania. So I'll turn that further discussion or questions over to them.
Yeah, I'll just right off the bat, let me say, my questions about legality were that not necessarily through the MPC, but that the more commonly understood Historic District Act does not allow for interior designation. I am not aware of a zoning ordinance in PA that does specifically call out interior designations. And that really is the extent of my comments on the legality of designating interior spaces.
My question comes out of, so it's been placed in Philadelphia, and it has been for quite some time. And I know that I think the number of interior spaces that they've designated is really quite small, 3 to 4 spaces, I think. And the amount of kind of restrictions that go into becoming a historically designated interior are very well defined. And I know it's something that also has been a topic of conversation in Pittsburgh, as well as they're going through the process of redefining the ordinance. And usually, or at least I know the way that it's structured in Philadelphia, it's specifically targeted with public spaces. So something like their city council chambers, for example. I think that, the Wanamaker's kind of interior in the Oregon are also something that's designated, as is the 30th Street, is it 30th Street station? Their Amtrak station. So kind of inherently public spaces. I know that it's also something that is, I think, driven by the owner, if I'm not mistaken. But being as how they're public entities that usually own the space, that those entities generally use it as a way to ensure that that historic space has some kind of historic review and process if there's ever an opportunity for renovations. And I know that's also something that came up in the conversations with the folks at the Erie Art Museum as they move forward with their designation process of the old Customs House, of, if there's an opportunity there to have that kind of guidance when it comes to alterations to that interior space. And so I just put it out before us if that's something that would be of interest or further discussion. I'm not sure.
Any commissioners have any comments on the interiors portion? I don't think we've ever discussed that before, but I could see Matthew's point of view.
Yeah,
The
exterior.
exterior.
Yeah.
There are buildings that are unique that have been practically gutted on the inside and
For
they left
public
the
buildings.
outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, where restaurants were installed and hood systems were put in and, fire suppression systems were cut through floors and up through roofs and, as a result of, in a uniquely historic real estate in the city of Erie, because there was no interior protection. If that's the direction we want to go, but I know that's really a huge can of worms.
So there was a suggestion.
I'll just add, I'm sorry.
So Kathy
Mark, you
or
done?
Matthew, was
Yeah.
a suggestion.
I just
to go-
wanted to add to some of the concerns that I had with adding additional responsibility onto the preservation planner at this point in time. was probably one of my bigger concerns, is that there's a lot that the planner has to prop up and do, and enforcement will eventually become part of his or her role. And then I thought that maybe just get the basics in place first, and then as the program continues to build and become successful, then look at adding on additional areas for preservation could be done at a later time. It's just really my only biggest concern was the administration enforcement of it at this time.
Seems like a pretty prudent concern.
Yes. And maybe we need to revisit the interior space later.
I agree with that.
It's a really complicated thing.
Okay.
It is, and I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for an educational session for us as commissioners in the future, where we are,
I would love that.
perhaps able to talk to a city planner or historic preservation planner within the city of Philadelphia, who can share with us some best practices and their kind of day-to-day with it. And we can become better informed on the issue as we move forward before any kind of decision or suggestion is made.
Okay. So that sounds good. Let's go in that direction.
Yeah.
I think that was the last question.
Okay.
Do we want to move on? And I think we got our answers to
Yes.
those questions.
Kathy, you have everything that you need from us, from the commissioners?
I do, yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to the next item here.
Thank you. If you guys want to drop off, that's fine, or do you want to stay on?
I have
if-
another meeting I'll get to. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
if I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, if our conversation about the ordinance is complete, if you don't mind, I'll drop off, and I'll just, next time we have the conversation, I'll try to get up there.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Yeah, it was a long day. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Kathy, and Matthew, you can stay on here.
Thank you all so much. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Good hearing from you all.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
So for new business, the next item is upcoming public hearings. And I think that was just a notification because I know it's on City Council's agenda.
It is, and they both will be there to present. And we'll go ahead and do a quick intro. Unless one of you would like to give a quick intro to both those applicants, unless one of the HRC members would like to do that.
I don't see any takers at the moment.
On January 8th, I can actually be at the meeting.
Okay, I mean, if you,
it's 9
that's
a.m.?
this Wednesday at 9 a.m., yes.
Oh, I can't.
Okay.
I'm so
It's
sorry.
fine, we're just gonna give a quick intro and they'll say a few things, it's fine. So yes, they're on the agenda.
Okay. Great. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, the tentative meeting dates, and those are all been published in the
Yes,
paper already.
They're all published and
So we're
you
all
should
set.
have them on your calendar.
Yep.
And if we want to do work meetings, we just would talk about it at,
Study session or something, we
Yeah.
would need to publish
Right.
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. That was B. C, set time, date, format for HIC work plan review and 2025 goals meeting discussion. Given our discussion today, I think, I don't know if we're ready to talk about that now, unless anyone has any items they want to contribute right now to, the upcoming goals or
I was
work
going
plans.
to mention that maybe for the next meeting, we can pull out some of the things again from the historic preservation plan and just keep that in front of the commissioners for the time for this transition in the interim. We'll be happy to do that.
So maybe everybody should revisit the preservation plan, take another look at it,
implementation part.
upcoming year, and really talk about what's, we could confirm what's already been completed and what we need to complete this year.
Sure.
What might be neat too would be to like put together a tour for people to see some of the buildings that did get our grants really, it's made a significant difference to them.
Yeah, I think we also have only two outstanding
Yeah, the people who've
grants
done the
that have
grants, right?
yeah, we have
But they
two
haven't asked for the money
outstanding
because it's a return grant or whatever they reimbursement.
reimbursement. Yeah.
because that I think that would be. I think we ought to photograph each building and the part of it that was our doing, and have some sort of a.
I think it'd be great if we actually thought.
That yes, there were problems. We've all acknowledged whatever issues were not perfect, but a lot of really good things did get accomplished, and I think we need to.
Just because of where we're at the moment with the searching for a new preservation planner.
Right.
I hear what you're saying. I like that idea. We did take photos at every inspection. So at some point in the future, we certainly can compile. We can
Before and
compile
after
some before and after pictures, and really, we'd like to, promote that.
And spend money on that.
We also received the award, the Historic Preservation Award from the American Planning Association, the Pennsylvania chapter. We finally got the picture from them. I think I might have sent that to you guys. If not, I'll send it to you. So we hope to do a press release. And so maybe we can kind of,
have it all about
right.
that.
Well, we can do that. We can do a few other things.
Well, no, but
we
I
can
mean,
talk
at
about
the same time,
right. So
offer tours or whatever.
and then one of the other things we'd like to talk about in the press release is like the not the next phase, but it is the next phase that the consultants will be in our West Bayfront neighborhood, and then moving into the third planning area. So, and that takes us to the last item. And I'm sorry, I have to go to an interview, so I don't mean to.
You just want to give a quick rundown?
Yes, really not much update here. They've been stalled, obviously, because they need to come to Erie when they can see the foundation of the buildings, and the snow has prevented that. So they're waiting to come back to Erie, EDR. I've had about 2 different times conversations with them. They're going through the back end, inputting the information that they did for downtown and for 12th Street that are completed, and they'll be back in our West Bayfront neighborhood next. So I don't have a confirmed date. We have a meeting not this week, but the following week. We have a bi-weekly meeting with them, and I'll know more then. But as far as the mapping our history and also the story map, we do need to continue to drive our community to that story map. So at this moment, I haven't exactly thought through how to further that. I know that there's been some discussion about using the commissioners a little bit more in terms of, to spread the word and get the community to participate in that. But I think we may rely a little heavier on the commissioners at this moment through the interim. So I'll be reaching out with maybe some ideas, but that is still ongoing. So look out for more communication.
I think it's something creative where it could be effective somehow.
Yeah,
I don't know what that is. I'm just trying to.
No, Heather. She was at some community events at the Hagen History Center. And I know we've been everybody's been sort of publicizing it on their pages and things, but we may need to think a little bit more creatively, but like you said, out of the box to drive these stories. Because some of these stories really, they're not recorded, and they're so interesting and so very important, right, to the history of our city. So
and I think there could be another press release to somehow get it out to news agencies.
Yes, that
people are always looking to spread some hopefully good news.
Well,
change,
and I liked your op-ed.
Well,
Not op-ed. Yeah, your
everything
article.
spreads the word,
Yeah, we should include that. When we do the press release, we'll include that with the photo, the award, and also the consultants coming back and driving them back to the story map. But we need to do a few other things to
let's
promote
try to
it.
all think creatively,
Yeah.
and we'll put our heads together.
I was going to say there was there wasn't a conversation with commissioners about the community engagement piece. So, the questions, like it's unclear who the postcards were emailed to. It's unclear what conversations may have been had. Like really
I'm sorry.
really to engage the public.
Yeah,
You
we
need to
have,
empower champions in the community to
Absolutely.
help with that. So if
Yeah.
there's a way, and
Yeah,
I
I-
think that the people that got our grants would be a big place to start.
it's a good
They're
idea.
thrilled.
Yeah,
You know?
Yeah, a letter to the editor from some of those folks would
I
be very
have
helpful
the
for us.
list of where the postcards went out,
Do you?
and
Okay.
and also some of the communications that the previous preservation planner did.
Okay.
But yes, we need to rely on commissioners, the champions, to, you know, even if we have to create some kind of toolbox, we're fine doing that. You know, something that would allow us to say, look, you know, if you talk to this group, here's what you need to do, get them, and it's, you may need to walk through with some people who are not as tech savvy with the story map,
right,
you know.
right.
So, yeah, I would welcome that. Please, if you have ideas, we are here to help. We have a few other people on our engagement team that could come out and supply you with whatever you need. If you have an event that you want us to be at where we can bring our iPads, we'll do whatever we can. So just reach out, and maybe we can talk through email about how we can work on the engagement piece, and I can relay what has already been done, and then you can work on that. Okay,
It'd be great to have
That's
a
fine.
follow-up discussion about that.
sure. Okay, that's
Okay.
great.
All right.
That's the last item on the agenda. Anything else before they go to the order?
No, I need to get.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I
Yes,
make that
let's
motion to
adjourn.
adjourn, and I second that emotion. I second that emotion.
Those in favor say aye.
Nice to
Aye.
meet you.
That's right.
Those opposed?
The
No.
Sorrells. I think
Nice
that's-
having you.